to another edition of GBB Live. That is Grizzly Bear Blues Live. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having a great start to your Wednesday, into your Tuesday, whatever it may have you. By the time that you see this recording, it will be Wednesday morning. We're going to be a week away from the draft, and there's plenty to discuss. And as always, it's a pleasure to have with me, again, I say it, can't say it enough, one of the best when it comes to covering the NBA, former host of GBB Live, good friend of the show, and I'm very happy to say good friend of my own, Parker Fleming. And Parker, good to see you again, man. Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Shawn, how's it going? I was thinking this, and I'm like, man, we're a week away from the draft, which means we're about less than a week away from Shawn's epic draft column that he writes every year.
Yeah, and we're putting that together. This one is going to be an interesting one because there are some clear prospects out there who feel that statistical profile, the grid-centric prospects, that make a lot of sense. We'll see if they go after those prospects. But the thing about it is that now within 10 days, a week, if you will, of the draft, the NBA Finals are over. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics. Parker, let's start there. Your thoughts on Boston? My initial thought is this. I know that this is a bit of a different team and that you don't have an already established all-time great on this team as a champion. I think Jason Tatum is going to be there at some point in time, especially now with this championship. But the thing that stands out to me about Boston is that I can't remember a NBA champion in recent NBA history whose top six were just so well defined for their roles to support Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You had your superstars, but the elite depth of Boston, their playoff rotation, it's hard to match even from some of the most recent NBA champions. An historic one run by them, and congratulations to them, well deserved.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the only one that I can think of that kind of contends in the way of like clear defined roles and just excellence. It was the 2019 Raptors when they had Kawhi, Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry, Gasol, Ibaka, Fred VanVleet, and Danny Green. Like that was an awesome 6 or 7, but obviously they don't have that same magnitude as Boston, because Boston, they have two star level big wings. They have two all defense guards that can also handle the rock, but also two, when the Jays are running the offense, they could be used off the catch, but also two in screen actions as well. Then you have Kristaps Porzingis. It's almost kind of like a trump card in it all. And then like Al Horford is your sixth best player, which sounds like crazy because Al Horford is still so good. So I mean, it's one of those things where I don't think people realize just how dominant Boston was because of the path that they had to the Eastern Conference or through the Eastern Conference. Let's be real, it wasn't as formidable because Joel Embiid was hampered with injury, and then Giannis and Dame with the Bucks, and then the Knicks, the wheels fell off towards the end of the second round, and then Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. So like, and then also too with Cleveland, you had Jared Allen and Donovan Mitchell go down. So it's like I think we lost sight of just how dominant Boston was. And I think it's also I read about this today on Substack Elitist. It's a great team building lesson because they had this perfect blend of continuity. After all those years, everyone's saying the Jays can't do it together. They stuck to it. They were aggressive and building around the core by, you know, going to get Derek White a couple years ago. And then also, too, the real aggressiveness was using Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, and Robert Williams to go get Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. So, but also, too, at the same time, another reason why so with the top six, the margin for error was so large, right? And it was also large because they have drafted and developed well, identified guys on minimum scale contracts to come in and contribute when their number's called, whether it's Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard, Xavier Tillman. Shout out X for getting his ring. And then you also too have like a guy like Luke Cornett that can come in as a little curveball here and there and fit their philosophy, doesn't make mistakes. So it's one of those things that they just had this perfect blend in their roster construction of continuity, aggressiveness, and calculation to where it ultimately led to having a championship roster construction that yielded their 18th banner.
Absolutely. And I think that, you wrote a good piece about, lessons learned from this, and I'll let those, to go out to Substack Elitist. Great content for a great cause. That's the best way that I can describe it. But I think for the Grizzlies perspective, if I'm looked at it correctly, this is the first time in NBA history that there have been 6 straight seasons with 6 different champions. So my point that I'm getting at is that if there was ever a time for a team to make the most of it, it would be now. And so the Grizzlies can learn lessons, from the Celtics. It's this team building exercise of finding the right complements to support Ja, Bane, and Jaren. And then from Dallas, it's taking advantage of the fact that you had this gap year that you can learn from, learn how to be healthier, learn really what matters, especially on offense, to survive and thrive in the playoffs. Maybe the Grizzlies can make a run over the next 1 or 2 years, like the 22 Warriors or the 24 Mavericks. So I think that there's a great thing that stands there. But again, we talk about depth. And for the Grizzlies, depth has been something that's been an asset of theirs, regular season wise, over the past few years. Now for Memphis is finding the right depth to surround their core that can really help them out when it comes to the playoffs. You feel you may have some starting points on that with G.G. Jackson as well as Vince Williams Jr. But Parker, in this episode, especially with the focus that we have with the number 9 pick in this draft, we're going to focus on where else do the Grizzlies need to focus to find some cheap sources of production that can really support their core. So we've got Vince, we've got GG. In addition to that, what are 1 or 2 other things that the Grizzlies should really focus on through this draft, maybe through some type of free agent signing? What are 1 or 2 skills that they should really focus on that they need extra depth in to support this core?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have an article coming out on Substack Elitist on Thursday about where the Grizzlies can find its next value contracts, because they have made really good roster construction decisions with like these short term, like not even short term, it's these like medium term, short value monetary wise contracts called the Hinkie specials. They're filled with team options, partial guarantees, non-guaranteed, stuff like that. So if it doesn't work, which it hasn't in the past, like they've, without much cost, they've cut Kennedy Chandler, Killian Tilly, Jonte Porter, and Kenneth Lofton Jr. from these contracts, but they've also extracted value with Xavier Tillman, John Conchar, and now G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams. And as this team is getting more and more expensive, and as we've seen teams find success with these types of players, whether it's Boston with Hauser and Pritchard, or it's Indiana with Nimhard and Ben Shepherd, or it's even Minnesota. I know he's on his second contract now, but finding Naz Reid to be a legitimate playoff rotation player, like there's value to be had deep in the, I know people say weak draft, but they're misunderstanding what they mean by weak draft. It's not. It's weak in the fact that there's not much star power, but there are a crap ton of guys. And I mean, I'm almost done with my top 60. I'm almost done with my draft guide. There are about 40-ish players that I feel like could contribute and be role players. Does that mean all 40 will hit? No. But there are 40 to 45 guys that I feel confident could end up being role players, which could lead to the Grizzlies extracting value. But to your ultimate question, as I got on a rant, I was yapping a lot, but it's shooting. And then dependent on how they go with the 9th pick, I would say a big, but let's just assume that first pick that they use, whether it's 9, whether it's 3, whether it's 6, whether it's all the way down to like 14, 15, 16, 17. Let's just say it's a big. Let's say it's Donovan Clingan. Let's say it's Zach Edey. Let's say Kyle Filipowski. I'd say shooting and defensive playmaking is what I think the Grizzlies should strive for when identifying these kind of next value contracts. So we're presuming either trading up from 39 or acquiring or using pick 39 or another second round draft pick. I know they also have pick 58 at their disposal. We don't have to get that deep in the weeds, but those are the 2 skill sets that I think the Grizzlies should target when they're trying to find that next source of cheap depth. Because Shawn, you alluded to these rookie scale contracts. The time's about to run out on some of these with Zaire Williams, Basanti Aldama, Jake Laravia is about to be halfway through his as well. You got to kind of have, and I think you'll see a lot of teams do this with this new CBA. You got to have guys developed, ready to contribute at some point within their rookie contracts. And this draft's a perfect opportunity for the Grizzlies to do so again.
Absolutely. And the thing that stands out to me is this, is that when it comes to Memphis going after these sort of players, this is why, along with um uh the shooting and the defensive playmaking, size is what also stands out. And because of these rookie skill contracts, that's the reason why, to me, Donovan Clingan and Reed Shepherd stand out as two of the most obvious picks for the Grizzlies to go after. You've got Donovan Clingan, his defensive playmaking and size, but then Reed Shepherd also his shooting and defensive playmaking. So that's what makes sense to me. But Parker, let's kind of look at this. We've gone over, who would make sense at that ninth pick. We've kind of talked about who would make the most sense. The thing that I'll ask you is this. We know that we need size, shooting, and defensive playmaking. Say Clingan goes off the board, or Clingan and Shepherd goes off the board in the top 5. We don't have the means to go up and get what we need. We just didn't do it. Those two are off the board. We still have pick 9. What stands out to you as a way to be able to then make the most of getting that type of pick, or maybe using 9 to create multiple opportunities to get those type of sources to bring into the fold for Memphis?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that's tough with like the multiple sources for Memphis is the idea of trading back to get additional first round picks. There is not enough teams with good enough draft capital to justify trading all the way down significantly. So like again, it's the draft. I've been working on a lot of stuff, here and there. I have another piece coming out later this week on what trades could look like with the number 9 pick based off not only just the intel, but the board, but also historical context. And with trading down, there's only 4 teams, Shawn, that have multiple picks between the 9th and the 39th pick. It's Utah with 10th, 29th, 32nd. I don't think you're getting those same tracks to the board. And I don't think, not only I don't see Memphis dropping 29 or 20 spots to get 29 and 32, but I don't see Utah adding 29 or 32 to move up 1 spot unless they are like obsessed with getting someone. New York with 24 and 25. I don't see them wanting to move up to 9, nor do I see Memphis wanting to move down 15 spots. Toronto with 9, 19, and 31. I can kind of see that, but it's also 10 spots down. You never see that. And in Milwaukee, I see them with 23 and 33. I see them either trading for a veteran or using that for cheap debt, as they're really expensive in the second apron. So I don't see the multiple cracks there. Could they just do one simple trade down and do like contract for contract? Maybe. When it comes to a player, I mean, it depends on how the board shakes out. So like I ran a mock draft with Kenan Womack. He's a radio host out in Austin, Texas. He covers the draft for SI, and he also has the Drunk Punk official Substack. And this got 3 guys that he had before at 6, 7, 8, 9 were Holland, Connect, Castle, which left Montes Buzelis, Cody Williams, Nikola Topic, Jacoby Walter, Zach Edey, Tristan Da Silva, Devin Carter, Jared McCain, among others. It's tough. I love the idea of getting Devin Carter, and I would love your feedback on this. But you're already undersized with Ja. Dez is already a little bit of an undersized too. Marcus Smart's undersized. Vince Williams is like, they say he's like 6'4", 6'5". You have Luke as well. With Devin Carter being a little under 6'3" barefoot, are you just too small? That's my only concern with Devin Carter, because he's awesome basketball player. But with this team's construction, I know a lot's been made about, oh, it's Anthony Carter's son, but it's also, are we making too much out of it to where I don't know how much the fit makes sense given who's ahead of him, but also too, the likelihood of him playing next to and playing in lineups next to Ja, Dez, Marcus Smart, some sort of combination. So I don't know where you stand. I would love to get your answer on this, because I think if the board fell that way, where you don't even have Castle, you don't have Holland, you don't have Clingan, you don't have Shepherd, I don't know where I would go.
Yeah, Devin Carter, I'm a huge fan of Devin Carter. We were talking about that piece that I'm going to write in regards to the players in this draft that match that Grizzlies statistical profile. Devin Carter actually has been one of the rare players, Parker, who's met it 2 years in a row. Met it in 23, met it in 24. And I will preach all day long. I'm about options, but I'm also about skill over size. So if Devin Carter is the one that makes sense, I think that he is a great pick for the Grizzlies. I'd love to trade back a little bit if someone wants to come up and get like a Cody Williams or somebody like that. And if we can get Devin Carter, that'd be fine. But I would not have any issue with picking Devin Carter, because then at the end of the day, you get that type of player that the Grizzlies have been able to make the most of in the past. Because they similar players like D'Anthony Melton. I know Desmond Bane didn't have the same defense, but they were able to work on his shooting. They've had success with similar player profiles before. And then what this allows for is now you've got in your backcourt Des, Vince, and Devin Carter. Vince and Devin Carter are two players that can play up above their size. But the other thing that this does for me, Parker, it gives you the ability to then use Marcus Smart potentially in the deal to where you can go get that size that you weren't able to find in the draft. So I understand the point about you not necessarily wanting to incorporate that thought process in a trade. But at the end of the day, for me, we're sitting here talking about what's the best way for the Grizzlies to get the most value out of this ninth pick. I think that's going with the guy that can impact winning now. I think that's going with the guy that is similar to, the type of picks that the Grizzlies have got in the past that have worked out well. And Devin Carter's a lot more athletic than some of those other guys have been. So I like the idea of getting Devin Carter. In my opinion, the skill and just the overall player type, to me, that would outweigh the fit maybe not making the most sense.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I mean, I will say one thing that we have disagreed on this cycle is the idea of justifying taking a rookie to make Marcus Smart more expendable. When I think if you're trying to win a championship next year, you need Marcus Smart. You need Marcus Smart, or you need, if you're not going to have Marcus Smart, if you're using him in a trade, you're got to get a guy like Jared Allen, or you got to get a guy like Mikal Bridges, in my opinion.
Well, no, and I want to make sure that we're understanding something.
Yeah,
I say trading Marcus Smart. I'm not sitting here then just going and trading him for any type of stretch four who makes $20 million a year. I think, to your point, that plays a part in it. But yeah, it's the same way as I am with Reed Shepherd. I get, maybe if you get a Devin Carter or a Reed Shepherd, if you haven't made a decision on Luke Kennard at that point, maybe Luke Kennard is the one who instead
right.
potentially becomes suspendable, but you need that shooting. I get it. It makes you small, but again, I feel like that it will figure itself out as time goes on. I'm not trying to sit here and trade Marcus Smart. I feel that this current version of the Grizzlies team, Marcus Smart is your fourth best player. But I do feel that if you could take a Marcus Smart and go get a two-way bigger type wing to be your fourth best player, or a difference making center, you probably have a higher ceiling as a team than your one with Marcus Smart. So that's the reason why I say that. But to your point, I'm probably overthinking it a bit too much. But in the end, I'll go with the same reason that I do with Reed Shepherd. You identified him. Shooting and defensive playmaking are two big skills that we really need on those type of marginal cheap contracts. And probably the second best source of that outside of Reed Shepherd in this draft is Devin Carter.
That's fair. That's fair. I gotta say, I mean, when it comes to player skill set, I mean, at the end of the day, the guys that I like, if the board shook out that way, the guys that I like are guys I would trade down for. Like, I would trade down a couple spots, swap some contracts, and get Tristan da Silva. I think he's an incredibly smart player that's going to contribute to winning from day one.
Would you pick Da Silva or Carter? If both were on the board, say both were on the board, if something worked out to where, on the Game Theory podcast, which, by the way, I've said it on X. Me and Parker have said it before. Shout out to Sam Vecini as well as Bryce Simon. Just has become one of my favorite NBA podcasts, especially draft season. They did the idea of, Portland trading up to 9, us trading back to 14, and us getting Duop Reith, who had a really good season, as a reserve big. I don't know if that gets that done, but my point is that if you trade back to 13 or to 14, Tristan da Silva as well as Devin Carter are on the board, who do you pick?
At 13 and 14,
Whatever scenario is there, if Tristan da Silva and Devin Carter are on the board, who does Parker Fleming take?
I mean, Devin Carter's higher on my board. So I'd go with Devin Carter. I think right now, just looking at my board, I'm right now toying between or debating really hard right now between 8 and 9, where I have Jared McCain and Devin Carter. Really torn on how I want to go about that for my overall board, just because I believe in the shooting of McCain, but the defensive playmaking, the rebounding, it's extraordinary. Like I can see Devin Carter playing that like you watch like the New York Knicks where they had guys like Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo just being absolute maniacs on the offensive glass, generating second possessions, flying around on defense, creating defensive events, hitting big threes. I can see Devin Carter doing that same shit.
Yeah, no, and that's the point. We talk about what really works in the playoffs for teams that don't have a player who can be a top 5 player. And I think Ja could be a top 10 player at times. I'm not necessarily saying I don't know if he could be a top 5 player, but it's optionality. And if you can get out of this draft a guy who's a guard who can shoot as well as defensive playmaking, then what that allows for, especially if you can find some way to get a big, we talk about optionality, Carter or Parker. We talk about ways the Grizzlies can win. Then for the future, you've got Ja, Dez, and Devin Carter, for instance, who can give you that 3 guard look. Or and if you get that center, you've got that center plus Jaren, who, if you need to go big, or you've got Jaren at the 5 if you need to stretch out. So I think that the other thing Devin Carter does is long term gives you some optionality to work out.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I mean, again, if that's one of the players that we're talking about on these like 4-year rookie contracts, guys like Devin Carter, guys like Tristan Da Silva, these older players that can come in, step in right away, and they're 25, 26 years old and still on the back end of that rookie contract, that's insanely valuable. That's insanely valuable as his team's getting more expensive.
And that's the type of player that the Grizzlies have hit on. And again, I think that getting the most value possible is what certainly works out. Now, Parker, the other thing that I'll ask you, though, is this. Say we work out what we do on this 9th pick. Again, we talk about needing shooting, needing defensive playmaking, needing size as well. That leads to the idea of maybe getting multiple rookies on 4-year contracts out of this draft. And something that I think has continued to be talked about more and more, especially since Jonathan Givony and Zach Lowe discussed it back at the first of last week, I believe. They talked about it on the Low Post that the Grizzlies are a team that like this draft. They said that they could see the Grizzlies going with multiple picks. So what I'll present to you, Parker, is with, again, those skill sets of shooting, defensive playmaking, and size being something that we could really use on those contracts. Whatever the Grizzlies do at the top of the draft, that's fine. But let's focus on the end of the first round where Zach Kleiman's traded up for Desmond Bane. Zach Kleiman has traded up for Santi Aldama in the past. Who are a few names that meet those type of skill set criterias at the back of this draft that you could see really being a focus for the Grizzlies?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's probably I have a couple of names identified. A lot of it is just kind of based off the variance of this draft, to be honest. I think if you're talking about a guy, and also another rumor I want to throw out there too, that I think Christian Clark, who is who covers the New Orleans Pelicans for NOLA News, he mentioned that New Orleans can look to trade their 21st overall pick for future second round picks, which you look at that and you're like, ooh, that's really intriguing. So I think the number one guy, I would say, a guy that's been really rising on my board as I watch the film, I see the idea of him more and more. It's Baylor Shireman. He's going to be 24 on draft night, so I know quote unquote upside, but he can shoot the heck out of the ball. He could do so off the dribble, loves that one dribble pull up to get to his 3 ball. He rebounds like a maniac, averages like 9 rebounds a game. He could put the ball on the floor, generate looks for his teammates. He's just a smart dribble pass shoot guy, and I think that the percentages are going to look even better when he's not having to create so much, he's not having to move so much, he's not the focal point of the offense. He's a complimentary cog next to guys like Desmond Bane, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., even guys like Marcus Smart, GG Jackson. They're not focused on Baylor Shireman. They're focused on those guys. And I think he can feed off of that. And I think he can come in, contribute right away, day one. And I think, and I wrote about this in Substack Elitas, one thing that you need is optionality where I think right now you have kind of that 5-out model, and you got to kind of get as many forwards that could, one, shoot, rebound, pass. Especially with Jaren Jackson Jr. Doesn't rebound that well. Baylor Shireman can come in. You can have these lineups of like, let's just throw a staggered lineup out there. Let's say it's Ja, Vince, GG, Baylor Shireman, Jaren Jackson Jr. That's going to open up the floor, while also you have the complementary rebounding to offset Jaren's rebounding with Vince Williams, Baylor Shireman, and also two John Morant and grab and go situations. You have the defensive playmaking of Vince Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr. Baylor Shireman, if you're trying to nail that margin pick, and you're looking at that historical track record of the Grizzlies not really caring about age when it comes to their player evaluations on draft night, I mean, Baylor Shireman should be at the top of the board.
And the more I see people talk about him, the more he makes sense. A couple of names that stand out to me. Kyle Filipowski is,
That's another one.
yeah, that's a name that certainly he meets the Grizz standard of what they're looking for, in that in their type of player, that statistical profile. He's a big that definitely could fit the 4 if with the Jaren at the 5. Don't necessarily know. If you get him, you probably have to go get a true traditional center that makes sense. And just some names that I like out there. Me and Parker, Parker, I think you acknowledge these names, though they may not necessarily be near the top of your list. But some names that stand out to me, Ryan Dunn, Kevin McCullough, Adim Bona, as well. And as someone that I could see potentially falling, if as we get more to teams wanting to value instant success. Eve Misi, I could see potentially being someone, if he falls, that could just be too good of an opportunity for the Grizzlies not to go after, to be someone that they can materialize. I know people don't necessarily want to sit here and take a guy that's going to take years to develop, but hey, you know what? I think that at some point that's too good of a value to pass up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Eve Missy, he's a guy I really like. I think the thing that I loved about Eve Missy is his motor is insane. He has an insane two-way motor. He tries to get second possessions. He chases blocks. Excellent shot blocker. He can defend in space a little bit. But the thing that really caught my eye is just like he experimented a little bit off the dribble towards the end of the season with Baylor, doing a little bit some short roll stuff, facing up against other big men in the high post. It wasn't always pretty, but the stuff that did work, you just sort of like flabbergasted. You're like, whoa, like that's a really cool part of his game. I mean, again, he's a 7-footer, athletic as all get out, great motor. He's charging at you down the lane in the short roll like a madman, and you never know. He had one of the best dunks I've probably seen in the draft cycle on Hunter Dickinson. It was insane. Like one of the opening plays against Kansas. But Eve Missy, Kyle Filipowski, because I think Kyle Filipowski, if we kind of want to blend some of the rumors that we know, Day'Ron Sharp is a guy out there the Grizzlies have interest in. He's more of that traditional big. He's going to generate second possessions with offensive rebounding. He's going to block shots. He's going to be more of a play finisher than a floor stretcher. So, but if you have a guy like Kyle Filipowski, which I mean, I'm lower on Filipowski, when it comes to like a lottery talent and top 20 talent, just because I'm not sure of his defensive position, because I don't know if he's quick enough to handle 4s on the perimeter. And I don't know if he's strong enough or has the frame to really handle being a drop big. And I don't know his recovery time when defending in space. Kind of makes me uneasy. But I mean, his dribble pass shooting is undeniable at his size. I get that aspect of it for sure. So I mean, if you're trying to get more 5-out, guys that can put the ball on the deck, you have a lot of size, you have a lot of shooting. Kyle Filipowski fits that bill. Ryan Dunn, the offense is so bad, but his defense is borderline like generational. If his offense, and I'm not meaning this as an insult, if his offense becomes competent, like if I'm an NBA team, I'm saying to Ryan Dunn, he's either going to be practicing big man stuff, so running pick and roll, doing stuff out of the short roll, really utilizing his athleticism to be that nominal big man, or I'm just saying, hey, go camp out in the corner and you're going to shoot 5 catch and shoot threes a game. May not be ugly. Don't worry about the percentages right now, but you're going to get comfortable at it because if he just has that with some play finishing, with the defense, he might his value might be tremendous. So those are some names that really I think we covered some good names. Obviously, like we can go down further the board, but that's a lot. I mean, that's a pre-draft guy, Cam Christie, 18-year-old, 6'6" shooting guard. I think he's a special shooting talent with his pull-up shooting. And I mean, he shot 40% from three on both catch and shoot and pull-up threes while nearly taking as many pull-up threes as he did catch and shoot threes. That's insane for an 18-year-old in a Power 5 conference. Jalen Wells, late bloomer out of Washington State. Jalen Bridges, upperclassman out of Baylor. Both of those guys kind of fit the big 3 and D wing mold, but they don't have that creation upside, perhaps. But those are some names that pop out the page for me when it comes to identifying where the Grizzlies can find their next value contract.
And the value contract doesn't just talk about what's there with, rookies, because at the end of the day, we could talk about how great these contracts are on 4-year contracts, but they're rookies. And we know that the later on in the draft that you get, the more likely it is that you're going to get a rookie who's not going to contribute immediately or contribute at all than earlier in the draft. So another route to Day'Ron Sharpe that I think certainly the Grizz are going to explore is that there is a pretty good market when it comes to potential big man targets, Parker, of players who have already been in the league, but due to how their situation has changed over the past 12 to 18 months, they could be expendable. You were talking, for instance, about what if we went up and got Kyle Filipowski in the draft and then tried to go get, Day'Ron Sharpe, or a situation, and that is you get Kyle Filipowski, basically that's your Santi Aldama replacement, because we're coming into the final year of Zaire Williams and Santi Aldama on their rookie scale contracts. Well, you've already got Gigi Jackson, who kind of, takes the place of what you were hoping Zaire would be. Kyle Filipowski becomes, I think a higher upside version of Santi Aldama. So taking one of Santi or, Zaire, putting him with the second round pick and going to get Day'Ron Sharpe, that's your traditional center. That's just an example of how you can get creative with one of these bigs that have already been in the league. But Parker, some other names that kind of fit that bill. Jalen Duren with, Detroit. It would be an interesting summer for him. Mark Williams, if for some reason Charlotte were to get another center. I think that there's 2 in Indiana, especially if Indiana re-signs Obi Toppin, Jarice Walker, as well as Isaiah Jackson. There's plenty of those type of names that are out there who, number one, in a draft deep with bigs, how are those names going to be impacted? But I think that Memphis could look to get those type of guys, a guy who could come in with untapped potential, but could become a bigger, better player in Memphis and maybe be in a reasonable price long term.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's 3 names that we've kind of glossed over that I think could be interesting in that capacity. Goga Bitadze. The Magic had this really nice stretch of basketball when Wendell Carter was out and Goga Bitadze was starting. Very good shot blocker, great rebounder. But I mean, and then Day'Ron Sharpe, kind of the same mold, but not the same extent. Jalen Smith is the one where I kind of look at. I need to obviously watch the tape as well. I can't just spreadsheet this, but I mean, just at a first glance, I mean, looking at dunks and threes right now, 2.6 offensive box plus or offensive estimated plus minus frame of reference. The only guys on the Grizzlies that had offensive EPM that high were Shawn and Dez. But let me run these by you, Shawn. The defensive playmaking, not quite there, but 92nd percentile in both offensive rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage. But then 72% at the rim, 54.5% in the mid-range, 42.4% from 3.
At this point, I'd much rather trend towards an offensive upside than a defensive upside that comes with rebounding absolutely all day long.
So like, what if you did, even if you got a big, like let's say you got Klingon, like what if you did Klingon and then Jalen Smith?
I
Eh,
I think that'd be fine, because at the end of the day, if that's your long term, goal, and I think probably you'd sign Jalen Smith for maybe 1 to 2 years, but the idea of Jaron, Klingon, Brandon Clark, and Jalen Smith, you got a lot of versatility, a lot of different options, and a lot of complementary skill sets that can really make a front court work. So yeah, I think that'd be perfectly.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, however way the Grizzlies decide to go about the center position, whether it's in free agency and trades, I think another thing too that I think we should discuss here is just the fact that, it like you said, it doesn't have to just be like a young vet or a rookie. It can be a vet. Like, let's say you get Klingon, or let's say you even get like Filipowski, like a stretchier bid, like a Filipowski or a Jalen Smith. What if you also try to go get Kevon Looney as like kind of that veteran muscle? You don't have to play him every night because in reality, and also too, all those options, you don't need to include Santi, which I think is kind of intriguing because then not only Santi Aldama, as he's a good basketball player. He's a good player to have off your bench. That's valuable. But also too, like let's say you're getting to the point at the trade deadline, you're like, okay, we need one more piece. You didn't blow all your assets in the offseason. You still have assets to work with to make that final push towards the championship. That's the value too. But also, I mean, think about the offensive upside, Shawn, of a front court. This doesn't sound sexy on paper, but after some of the stuff, what we know about some of these guys, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark, Jalen Smith, Santi Aldama. When you think about everyone's winning this 5-out offense, those are five big or four big men that kind of fit that mold in a sense, aside from Brandon Clark. But Brandon Clark is so efficient inside the arc that it kind of nullifies itself in a sense. And then also, too, you have that veteran muscle where you can toss out Kevon Looney. Like, that's fine. I mean, I wouldn't make that my plan A, maybe not my plan B, but like it's a good, solid plan, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and you got Andre Drummond as well, and I come back to this because I think Andre Drummond could certainly be that Steven Adams type player, and then that 15 to 20 minute role a night that can help out. But that's what I come back to is the Grizzlies already had Steven Adams under contract for 12.5 million this upcoming season. I know Parker, we both would love for the Grizzlies to go talk with Atlanta about Onyeka Okongwu, Wendell Carter Jr., Nas Reed, obviously. Those probably are much more unlikely than likely. But the point that I'm getting at is that I just feel as if the Grizzlies, while they do value that archetype, they wanted to find something that they could control longer at a cheaper cost than what Adams was going to be. So when we talk
Yeah,
about different names, that's why we're talking about them, because they come with potentially more cost control. They come at cheaper costs, but they still could potentially provide similar value that you were going to see Adams provide. But at the end of the day, I also think what this points to, and this will be, where we wrap up with this edition of GBB Live, is that listen, there have probably been very few, if any, who have been louder about going to get Klingon than Parker and myself. I know plenty out there love him when it comes to Grizz Nation, but I think the point is this: is that, and I think some others have definitely, said that this, accurately, as the reason why we want to go after and get Klingon is because he probably is the best option of coming with cheap cost control, providing value in the areas that we need it. But he by no means is the only way for us to fill this center position. We've just mentioned in this podcast alone 3 to 4 other different avenues with multiple options down those avenues the
yep,
Grizzlies can go. So if Klingon is not on the board, if a trade up opportunity is not there, there still is plenty of ways from it to extract good value and to be able to address areas of needs out of the draft while also keeping plenty of assets in place to go get more win now options if that's what you want to do, to where you're both getting value from this draft for the future, but also really putting together a strong team in the present that can, take you as far as you hope to go as a championship contender.
absolutely, absolutely. I gotta ask one other thing. 'Cause I know we're all on the same page with Donovan Klingon. I don't think there's much more to be said. I will say with cost control, like if you have the 4-year contract, then he's extension eligible. And if you don't get to extension, there's restricted free agency. You know, this is kind of, I don't know about you, but this seems better than just having this like revolving door at center of like each summer we got to be like, or every 2 summers, like, oh, well, what are the Grizzlies going to do at center? Because so and so's contract's expired. Like, what's there to do? Especially too with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's going to be lined up for a well-deserved extension, perhaps a max one. I would say probably a max extension. You want that valuable contract and that starting center spot or starting front court spot, however way they go. Donovan Clingan he just fits that mold because at the end of the day, I think they want that optionality. They want that optionality of like they have with Adams, you know? With Adams, they started with Adams. He's the guy that can take pressure off of Jaren Jackson Jr. and allow Jaren to roam and have this advantage of just being absolutely massive in the front court. And then also too have the optionality of like, okay, let's let's go a little smaller, switch a little bit more, run a little bit more. We're going to close with Brandon Clark instead of Steven Adams. Or now you could have the option of like, let's go John Morant, Desmond Bain, Marcus Smart or Vince Williams, GG Jackson, and Jaren Jackson Jr. as a 5-out kind of deal. Or you're in a play like, because at the end of the day, I don't mean to deter this and go on a rabbit hole here, but I think this is an important point to say with and it kind of wraps up points you said earlier. With parity, you can't build a formula to beat one team. You can't. You got to be able to beat all these different kind of teams in a in four rounds. So, Boston wins. Everyone's thinking, oh, how do we build a team like the Boston Celtics? How do we build a team to beat the Boston Celtics? When you do that, you're going to leave yourself vulnerable to bad matchups. The best case is malleability, the ability to adapt to whatever sort of team you're playing. If you're playing a team like Minnesota, you got to be huge. Playing Denver, you got to be huge. When you're playing Oklahoma City, you got to shapeshift and be able to defend all the way out to the perimeter against all 5 players. Against Boston, same stuff. You got to defend in space a whole lot more. You got to be able to do all of it. And that's, I think, the thing that appeals to me so much with getting a guy like Donovan Clingan is you're not blowing major resources on a center position when you have Jaren Jackson Jr. Donovan Clingan, he's young. You can develop. He can be developed. He can develop a 3-point game that you didn't have with Steven Adams. Who knows? But I want them to have optionality, and that's where I ultimately go with Donovan Clingan, especially too, since I think he along with the guy you said, Reed Shepherd, and then I let's not mention Alex Sarr. I think he's going to go 1 or 2. Those 3 guys are the most fail-proof prospects in the draft, and for the Memphis Grizzlies trying to win a championship, you need fail-proof.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'll say is that, again, the other thing about Clingan is who are these players that don't take possessions away with their usage from your best players and John,
Yep.
Bain, and Jaren, but still are able to potentially elevate their level of play. And
Yep.
that's the reason why I feel that a Klingon is someone that could definitely do that. But Parker, it's been a pleasure. We're going to be back with one more of these episodes, and then a week from Wednesday, we hopefully, we'll be, together covering the
Oof.
draft. Looking forward to it. Always a pleasure to be with Parker and just, provide great content. And we'll see where we can go. But Parker, do you have anything else? I know you got plenty of work coming up. I'm going to have some pieces as well coming out, but I think that just basically just tell everyone to make sure to check out Bluff City Media as well as Substack Elitis for all the latest content.
Yeah. So more importantly, check out Shawn's draft preview that he does. It's impeccable every single year. And it's always been impeccable since he called the fact that Desmond Bain, Xavier Tillman, and Killian Tilly would all be Memphis Grizzlies in the same draft. And he's even identified, I think didn't you also identify Jake Arabia, Vince Williams, David Roddy, any other player?
Yeah, no, several of the players yeah, will fit that.
2020, 2021, they went away from your formula.
Yeah, yeah. 2022 they stuck with it, and then last year they stayed away as well. For good reason. They're trying to mix high upside, and my
Yep.
formula comes to more identifying those older prospects that could be better than expected in the NBA.
Yep. Absolutely. And then I'm hoping, unless I come into any speed bumps along the way, I'm hoping to drop my draft guide on Monday on Substack. It said it's more draft specific rather than the Grizzlies, but I mean, you can count on stuff from me every single day leading up until the draft. I'll have another mock draft for the top 9 out with Bryce Simon. I'm gonna have an article version kind of this topic as well that I have already scheduled out. I'm going to have a trade, like what could trades look like at 9 article, and then ultimately the draft guide, and then my ultimate Memphis Grizzlies draft night preview. So it's going to be fun. I'm excited. I'm excited for the 2-day process because Shawn, I'm just excited for that because I think it's just going to allow some time for everything to breathe a little bit. More importantly, for the front offices that are pulling all-nighters, trying to also get pulled out of summer league roster with Exhibit 10 guys. The 2-day one, it's going to be good. I think also too, people are totally missing the fact that of course they come out with the 2-day draft when Bronny James is projected to be in the second round. People are going to watch to see where Bronny James goes. So, but yeah, I'm excited for the draft. It's been a lot. I put a lot of work into this draft cycle, and I'm excited to see how everything plays out. And I'm excited to see how the Grizzlies go about this in efforts to bolster this team to win an NBA championship.
And also want to put out a couple of different things. Parker is going to have a ton of excellent content. Make sure to check out for that. Both City Media with the different digital sources that we have, the 901 Grizz Pod, the Anthony Sane Show, No Bluffing Podcast, obviously Grizzly Bear Blues Live. So many different podcasts out there, Next Gen Podcasts as well. So daily, you're going to have different perspectives covering what the Grizzlies are going to look to do. But a couple other things that I'll end the show with is that we're a week away. And if there is a general manager who in recent years has made moves that impacted his team's draft before they've occurred, it's Zach Kleiman. Did it twice, 2021, 2023. But also watch out for news on Luke Kennard. I know that there's up in the air kind of when they can release news, but Luke Kennard's team option is on June 28th, the day after the 2-day draft. It'll be very interesting to see what the Grizzlies do when it comes to his option, his team option for 14.7 million. Me and Parker, two huge advocates for Luke Kennard. I think he's going to be on the team next year. I hope that maybe they can work out an extension for him at a lower average annual value. But if we get an indication they've done that, that definitely gives an indication of what, that they've got some shooting in place for the off season. But if they, for some reason, don't, if they decline the team option, or if they pick it up, does that mean potentially he could be used in a deal, or they're looking to free up the money to do other things with? So the decision on Luke Kennard, we could get information on that pretty quickly. But Parker, you got anything else before we end this edition of Grizzly Bear Blues Live?
No, I just need next week to hurry up.
Agreed. For Parker Fleming, my name's Shawn Coleman. We'll talk to you again soon here on GBB Live.